Former American biotechnology entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes is somebody who has one of those grace to grass stories. She started out as an outstanding young talent, creating her own company called Theranos by the age 19. The company soared in valuation after it claimed to have revolutionized blood testing, and Forbes named Holmes the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire in America, based on a $9 billion valuation of her company. With a net worth of $4.5 billion US, she is another level of rich. So here's how this billionaire spends her money. Now, I'm sure most of you have noticed some pretty offsetting things that I've previously said, whether it be the use of the past tense, former, or the mention of Elizabeth Holmes' grace to grass story. All these point to the obvious fact that Elizabeth is no longer considered to be a billionaire, or an entrepreneur for that matter. There was this whole scandal that happened in respect, and to tell that story, I'll have to take you back a couple of years. Rolling all the way back to March 2004, Elizabeth decided to drop out of Stanford School of Engineering and use her tuition money as seed funding for a consumer healthcare technology company. Pretty sure Mommy and Daddy didn't see that one coming. What started out as a ridiculous idea from a youngster developed into so much more. And 10 years later, Elizabeth became the youngest self-made female billionaire and was even regarded as the next Steve Jobs. Of course, that Steve Jobs part was mostly her doing, and she decided to dress exactly like him and even called herself at times the female Steve Jobs. She must have gotten some parts wrong because Jobs did not get himself into such a mess though. In 2014, Elizabeth Holmes, then 30, was on top of the world. She founded a company valued at $9 billion, supposedly bringing about a revolution of diagnosing disease. She claimed that with a few drops of blood, Theranos, with its Edison test, could quickly detect conditions like cancer, diabetes, without all the hassle of needles. Talking about using fears as motivation, right? As Elizabeth actually did have a fear of needles. The credibility of Theranos was attributed in part to Elizabeth's personal connections and ability to recruit the support of influential people. Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, James Mattis, Betsy DeVos, and all of whom had served or would go on to serve as U.S. presidential cabinet officials. Everything seemed like it was working out, until the cat was let out of the bag. Turns out, the tech that was supposed to revolutionize diseases, you want to guess what I'm about to say, didn't work. Yikes. The shortcomings and inaccuracies of Theranos' technology were exposed, along with the role that Elizabeth played in covering it all up. Elizabeth raised venture capital money for Theranos from prominent investors like Oracle founder Larry Ellison and Tim Draper, the father of a childhood friend, and the founder of a prominent VC firm, Draper Fisher Jurvetson. To date, Theranos has raised more than $700 million. She took investors' money on the condition that she wouldn't reveal how Theranos' technology worked. Plus, she would have a final say over everything within the company. So you can understand why the investors snapped when they found out that it was all a scam. In 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Theranos, Holmes, and Chief Operating Officer Ramesh Balwani with security fraud. She was accused of defrauding investors and patients with her claims of revolutionizing lab testing technology with a machine that used just a single drop of blood. She pleaded not guilty. However, a U.S. jury found Elizabeth Holmes guilty of conspiring to defraud investors in the blood testing startup, convicting her of 4 of the 11 counts. That is 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Her trial ended in January 2022, when Elizabeth was convicted of defrauding investors and not guilty of defrauding her patients. The jury found her not guilty on 4 charges and failed to reach a verdict on 3 others. However, she had pleaded not guilty to all charges. Now, she's been convicted to a jury in California on 4 counts of fraud, each of which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Well, with at least 20 years of federal prison on the line, she had a situation where she has to pay potentially millions of dollars in restitutions and fines. Her sentencing is scheduled for September 26 of 2022, and to be honest, it might not end well for her. With all this unwanted attention and her ongoing string of court trials, Forbes has revised her net worth, and it now has a value of 0. Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes is currently literally worthless. Regardless, we're still looking at how she spends her millions, because they didn't just disappear. We've talked a lot about rich, and Elizabeth Holmes is in a class of her own, or was, as the case may be. She and her partner, William "Billy" Evans, are said to be living on the grounds of the most expensive estate currently listed for sale in the Bay Area. Green Gables and Woodside, priced at $135 million. The couple lives in a 9-bedroom English country manor-esque home located on this 74-acre estate. To put it simply, it's pretty wild. To start, it boasts 7 houses, 3 swimming pools, a tennis court, a flower and vegetable garden, also a reservoir, and a huge Roman pool. The estate was built in 1911, and it is not rare to see Roman deers on the property. It's also well known for hosting politicians, royalty, and Silicon Valley elite. Apart from their luxurious home on this super expensive property, the couple also has an apartment in Lombard Street, San Francisco's Russian Hill neighborhood, which they rented for over $5,000 a month. Airbnb describes Russian Hill as an intimate neighborhood, where more likely to host wine tours than bar crawls, characterized by hidden stairways and cable cars. This apartment is located just a few blocks from one of San Francisco's top tourist attractions, the famously crooked block of Lombard Street. Dubbed as the most crooked street in the world, Lombard Street attracts more than 2 million visitors a year and apparently houses the former 121st richest person in the world. The apartment is part of Lombard Place Apartments, a complex of 3 identical 7-story buildings composed of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units. The complex is also pet-friendly, which meant Elizabeth and her husband could live there with their Siberian Husky, Balto. The dog reportedly served as the unofficial mascot for Theranos during the company's final days. The apartment that Elizabeth and Billy reportedly called home was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit on the 3rd floor. Their apartment also features a relatively small kitchen with minimal counter space, making navigating that area difficult. I guess you gotta cover up your lies by living modestly compared to your actual net worth. As the boss of one of Silicon Valley's unicorn startups, Elizabeth Holmes had a lot of cash, and she knew exactly how she wanted to spend it. Like I mentioned before, Elizabeth took a real liking for the Apple creator Steve Jobs and chose to live her life in exactly the same way he did, to the point of wearing black turtlenecks exactly like he did. She even frequently called her own company Theranos Blood Testing Systems the iPod of healthcare, and nicknamed one of the systems 4S, in obvious reference to the iPhone. When Elizabeth began her rise to fame, she hired a security detail to drive around her in a black Audi sedan with no license plates, just like Steve Jobs used to lease a new Mercedes every 6 months to avoid having license plates as well. She's said to have 2 security guards in her detail, and to be very frank, executive protection costs a lot. Apparently, executive security guards get paid about $100,000 a year, and Elizabeth had 2 security guards, which means she spent $200,000 a year, if not more, as this security was round the clock. She really lived the elite life, and it was very evident in the way she did everything, and I mean everything. She patterned her life so much after Steve Jobs that she even actually got herself 2 separate drivers. It is said that Elizabeth Holmes didn't go anywhere on her own, which kind of explains why she had 2 drivers. And presidential executive drivers are actually way more expensive than your regular Uber drivers. An executive driver costs about $120,000 a year, and this girl had 2, which means she spent, well, you can do the math. Like every big-time company CEO, Elizabeth has not 1, but 2 assistants. Assistants to the CEO assist the boss with her daily administrative duties and complete a broad range of tasks. They also communicate with the staff, the board members, and others on behalf of their boss, amongst a few other functions. There are regular tasks for assistants to the CEO, but Elizabeth Holmes has her assistants doing this, that, and a little more. According to sources, she was a demanding boss, and she wanted her employees to work as hard as she did. Anyway, she once had her assistants track when employees arrived and left each day in order to ensure that they worked as hard as possible. To encourage people to work longer hours, she started having dinner catered around 8 p.m. each night, which makes you wonder how much they actually got paid. The approximate cost for each executive assistant is about 10% of the boss's salary. Considering how much Elizabeth made as the CEO of Theranos, her assistants were paid over $200,000 a year. And since she had 2 of those, as that brings us to the end of the video, I thank you all sincerely for watching how the secretive Elizabeth Holmes spent her millions.